Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking financial accounting. And in this series of videos, we are working on the short exercises that are the assigned exercises from the digital study guide for Chapter 11. Note, accounting is about understanding the concepts and then applying that understanding to the situation at hand. If you get the application aspect wrong, that is one thing and is easily remedied by watching someone else work the problem. However, if you don't understand the concepts, that is a whole other thing. Watching a problem worked out will not help you if you don't understand the underlying concepts. Go back and study the text material again and watch the theory videos. If you still don't understand the concepts, then either email or telephone an instructor to get help with that understanding. Right, so in this video, let's see here, yep, 11-8, or I should say, yeah, most likely it's just going to be one video here because when you're creating these financial statements, when you're creating the statement of cash flows, it does take a little bit of time. But it says here, Nemo Spas began 2014 with cash of $32,000. During the year, Nemo Spas earned service revenue of $610 and collected $575 from customers. Expenses for the year totaled $449,000, of which Nemo paid $417,000 in cash to suppliers and employees. Notice at this moment in time, I mean, we're being given all of this detail saying, okay, this is how much is going to like suppliers and employees. And because the way the data is being presented, if you understand the difference between the indirect method and the direct method, you know that this is the way the information will be presented to you for the most part in the direct method. Remember, for the indirect method versus the direct method, the investing and the financing activities, all right, for both are pretty much the same, okay? But the difference between the indirect and direct method comes in the way the operating activities are presented, okay? And the way you look at those, all right? Um, go back to the theory videos and look at the two different templates, okay? The two different exhibits that show what they look like. You'll see that, yeah, the investing and financing activities look the same on both using both methods. But how you glean the information in using the indirect method versus the direct method is slightly different. In this previous exercise, when you looked at this data, okay, you can see it says an increase in, like increase in this, a decrease in that, a payment of this, a payment of that. And so you're kind of like saying, okay, how does this affect cash? But when you're looking at the direct method, you're kind of like looking at the accounts themselves, the expenses themselves, in order to determine, what effects they had. Right? But we'll get to that in just a bit. I just want you to realize that this is generally the way the information is presented, and you'll have to pull that information for the direct method, from the way that this information is presented. But anyway, so Nemo Spas also paid $84,000 to purchase equipment and paid a cash dividend of $57,000 to stockholders during 2014. It says prepare the company's statement of cash flows for the year ended 2014. Format cash flows from operating activities by the direct method. Right? So, they could have just said format the statement of cash flows using the direct method, right? But in this particular problem, and the reason why I went through all of the spiel about how this information looks is because they're telling you that, the operating activities is what is going to look different as far as this statement of cash flows is concerned. All right. So with that said, I'm going to move this up here so that I can have a little bit more space. And again, if you watched the previous video and saw me work 11-7, I'm explained I'm not going to go through and create this as a formal typewritten Word document that I'm going to give to somebody else. Okay, so what I'm doing here is for my own edification, my own homework problem. I'm going to take shortcuts. I'm not going to write everything out. It's not going to be formatted the way it should actually look. If I'm actually if I was in a business I would be doing the work the way I'm showing you here. However, when it comes to presentation of my work, right, I'm going to type it up and it's going to look like what is in the solution manual or in the textbook. It's going to look like those statement of cash flows. So anybody who's watching this and they see me, abbreviating and, this type of thing, I think that's what they can do to turn in, provide that as an answer to a test question. All right, then you're going to get, deducted. All right, period, because it's not properly formatted. When it comes to doing an exam question, if it asks for a statement of cash flows, you present it correctly, okay? But when you're doing, quote unquote, the work in order to create the statement of cash flows, take all of the liberties you want as long as you understand what you're doing. But when it comes to presentation, and that's what it is on an exam, is presentation. That's what it is in the workplace when, the owner wants to see the statement of cash flows. You have to present it correctly. You can't present it in your own chicken scratch, all right? So with that said, the heading, we're going to have one. And again, the heading is pretty much like the date formatting that is the same as an income statement or the statement of retained earnings, right? So you're going to have for the period ending December 31st, for the year ended December 31st, that type of thing. Right? So of course, we're going to create the statement of cash flows in basically 4 different sections, right? And I'm going to just enumerate these. Now you're not going to write 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I'm writing these just so that you can see the structure of how the statement, and this is how I'm going about it, how to create the structure for the statement of cash flows. So I'm going to have I'm going to start out with cash flows from operating activities, right? And see, I'm abbreviating it. I'm not going to write it all out. Cash flows from investing activities, cash flows from financing activities, and then I'm going to have my net increase in cash. And again, most textbooks will give you problems that are where you're always going to have an increase, okay? And that's the way the examples are, and it's sort of like the income statement. They create situations where you always see a profit, but we know that in the real world that doesn't happen. There's going to be losses, but they don't really give you that much experience in how to deal with a loss, okay? When you're looking here and it says net increase in cash, and if you look at most of the statements, I mean, in the previous exercise it was an increase in cash also. Just realize that you're not going to write net increase in cash when it should be a decrease in cash, okay? You have to format the statement accordingly, whether you have a profit or loss like on the income statement, or you have an increase or decrease in cash like on your statement of cash flows. Right, so now that I have the different sections set up, now I'm going to go and look at the information to be able to flesh out the cash flow section for my operating activities. Right. So the first line item I'm going to have is let's see, it says here, Nemo Spas earned service revenue of $610,000 and collected $572,000 from customers. Remember, we're only looking at cash here. So yeah, our revenue account would say $610,000, but we're only collecting $572,000 in cash. So it's collections from customers, and that amount is $572,000. Remember, as opposed to, we're doing the direct method, as opposed to the indirect method, you started out with net income, right? And then you're adjusting your net income, taking out everything that isn't, that doesn't affect cash, all right? Like depreciation expense. Here, from the information, we're just looking, for the cash aspect of it. So even though, if we have a profit, if we have our revenues less our expenses to give us our profit or loss, our net income, okay? If we have let me write that better, to get our net income, which is what we start out with in our indirect method, here we're not looking at the net income. We're looking at our revenues, and our revenues are made up of accounts receivable, cash sales, credit card sales, this type of thing. What we're looking at is the detail, in essence, of our revenue accounts and saying, okay, which portion of that was strictly cash? And that's what we're showing from the direct method, and that's why it's called direct, right? Because we're taking it directly from the information, from the transactions that occurred during the course of business. Right, so that deals with our revenue section, and now expenses for the year totaled $449,000, okay, of which Nemo paid $417,000 in cash to suppliers and employees. And so the rest is accounts payable, right? Right. If I have $449,000 in expenses, but we paid $417,000 in cash, the rest has to be something else, what, $32,000, and that's generally in accounts, payable, right? So again, even though we have $449,000 in expenses, we only want to know what the cash portion is. Don't use the 449. The cash portion is the 417. So we have payments to suppliers and employees of $417,000. Okay, so that'll give us our net cash provided by operating activities, right, of $155,000. Difference between those two numbers. Right? So this work is not that difficult. Just be aware that you may have, here they're giving you the exact amount, okay? But depending upon the problem, or depending upon the way the information is presented to you, because remember, other people in the organization, if you're in a business, they don't know how you're supposed to get the information, or you're like, you're the quote-unquote accountant, and your bookkeeper comes over and says, oh yeah, I had 449,000 in expenses, and our accounts payable is 32,000. Okay. Well, which number are you going to use, right? Right. Well, you're going to have to manipulate, do some math in order to be able to figure out that 417,000 is what you used in cash. Here they're telling you they're using it in cash, but depending upon the way the information is presented, you may have to figure these things out. All right, so again, it's about understanding the concepts and applying it to the situation. It's not about mimicking or picking information, from, just, oh, well, let me look around here. Oh, this looks good. Okay, I'm going to choose this number. Or by looking at a different problem and following that one step by step exactly, just changing numbers. Most likely, you're going to get that wrong. Understand the concepts and apply them to the situation at hand. Right, so this is the difference in our the operating activities, the difference between our direct method and indirect method. Now, for the investing activities and the financing activities, these are going to be basically the same as if you had whichever method you're going to use. So the cash flows from investing activities, we had, let's see here, I collected, paid cash, and he also paid $84,000 to purchase equipment. All right. Well, the purchasing of equipment is the adding of a long-term asset, right? So we're going to show it as the acquisition of equipment. and that's, since we have to pay cash for it, that's $84,000 that came out of our pocket, right? And since that's the only item here, then our net cash provided by investing activities is a negative $84,000. Notice I'm using two columns, right? Doing math in one column, and whatever I get for the total in the right-hand column, because why? To get the net effect on my cash, I'm going to consider my operating activities, my investing activities, my operating activities, my investing activities. Now I don't write this here, I'm just pointing this out, okay? Maybe I should have done that in blue, all right? And then I'm going to do my financing activities, right? And for our financing activities, it says here, paid a cash dividend of $57,000 to stockholders. Well, we know that dividends are a financing activity, right? And go back to the first, well, the second one, I believe, theory video, which showed the various adjustments, the activities that affect operating, investing, and financing activities. Get a clear idea of, what each one is involved. And then when you're looking at data that's presented like this, you can look at this and say, okay, yeah, I have dividends. Dividends are a financing activity, right? So then I could, add that to that particular section. So here we have a payment of dividends, and that was for $57,000. That's cash going out because we're paying that amount out. And again, we have the net cash provided by financing activities. So that's 57,000. That's going out. So our net cash increase or decrease, depending upon what the total of these numbers are, is going to be $14,000. Okay, I'm doing this in blue. So, in this column, we want to have the total of the operating activity, the investing activity, and the financing activity in order to get the increase or decrease. Okay, if that number ended up being, let's just say, as an example, let's say this ended up being 130,000. Okay, and this still stayed at 84, and this stayed at 57. Okay, the difference between when I add those numbers up, 130 minus 84 minus 57, I end up with a negative 11,000, right? And so instead of writing net increase here, I would write net decrease, all right? That's just to be able to, point out what happens when you have, a decrease in cash. Like I said, most times the homework problems and the textbooks, they present things in only one manner. They don't really show you the opposite side, because they just figure that you can figure that out yourself, I guess. Right? So then we, under the net increase in cash, we take the cash balance from the previous year, and in this case here, that was, let's see here, interesting. It says here, Nemo Spas began 2014 with a cash balance of 32,000. So let me get this right, because I think the solution is wrong. Instead of having a date of 2012, well, no, let me get this. Let me think about this. All right. And then we're looking at, right, so this is for, yeah, okay. I think this solution is wrong. If you'll notice, the book says that this should be 2012, but really it should be 2013, okay? So the solution is wrong. I guess it's a typographical error there. So this should be 2013, and this is 32,000. Why? Because it says it began, if we draw a timeline, and if this is 2014 and it's beginning with 32,000, all right, that means 12/31 2013 has the balance of 32,000. And right now, we're looking at the heading date of 12/31/2014, which would be, so this would be 2015. So we're looking at this date as 12/31/14. So the cash balance at 2013 is 32,000. The cash balance on 12/31/2014 is the sum of these two numbers, or $46,000. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Aside from the looking at the solution manual and seeing that these dates are incorrect, all right, by the year. This is how you go about creating a statement of cash flows using the direct method. And again, I'm just, you know, I did this all. This is the work I would do now. If I'm sure that all of this work is correct, and now I actually want to create this statement of cash flows, I'm actually going to go and type it up in a Word document or whatever, as it looks like in the solution manual. So with that said, that's going to be it for this video. And if you don't understand something, go back and watch the theory videos. But the more of these problems that you do, the more accustomed to it you'll be. Yeah, you have the two different methods. You should understand the difference between the two different methods, and that's why I tried to associate the difference so that it makes it a little bit easier. You just need to know investing and financing activities, but depending upon which method you use, the operating activity section is going to look a little bit different. You're going to pull information a little bit differently from the data that you're given. But you can, as long as it's not like you have to rememorize everything. Just tweak your thinking a little bit. And if you still don't understand something about how the information is pulled, go back to the beginning theory videos, like I said in those 3 slides, for the different activities that are most common for operating, investing, and financing. And always keep those, use that as the checklist per se, in order to be able to create your, what to look at when creating your indirect method or your direct method. And if you still have any questions, feel free to contact the instructor. But you get this more by just doing again and again and again. And then when you see an outlier activity, one that you haven't seen before, if you understand how to think, through how does this affect cash, then it becomes relatively easy for you to add that to the particular statement of cash flows. All right. So with that said, I will see you in the next video for 11-9.